Joining us now all the way from Laramie, Wyoming is Brent Vigen. He's the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and associate head coach for the Wyoming Cowboys. Brent, thanks for joining us.
Oh, great to be on with you.
And Brent, tell us, or at least my curiosity, other than a pay grade situation, what does the associate head coach do? You don't really. This isn't baseball. Craig Bowl is not going to get ejected. So what's the role of the associate head coach?
Well, an occasional time when coach might leave to go recruiting or something like that, you maybe break the team down. No, I don't know. I think there to be an advisor to him. You know, what's become apparent, maybe more so than ever, to have at least the order of who would be the next in charge, I think is probably more appropriate in these times than it's ever been before. So hopefully we don't have to cross that road, but I think it's just a fancy title more than anything.
Do you think then that there would be a peaceful transferal of power if that were to come to be?
Peaceful. I wouldn't be a good situation. We need coach here, but we've worked together long enough that I think at least I have a good sense for what he'd be looking for, all that type of thing.
Well, of course, we're going to be talking to Brent Vigen about Josh Allen and his hot start. He coached Josh Allen at Wyoming, but some congratulations are in order. Late Thursday night, especially East Coast time, the Mountain West Conference announced that its 12 teams are going to play an 8-game conference schedule, the third FBS conference to reverse course and say after canceling its season or postponing until the spring, I guess, that they will play in the fall. So starting October 24th, you got a month here, Coach, to get going. First off, congratulations that you're going to play games, but what's this been like for you in trying to keep the guys ready, and now you got to prepare for some games?
Well, it's been a real mix of emotions. Going back to August 10th when we were shut down. We were in a really good place here at the University of Wyoming here in Laramie. Our guys had worked really hard, really for 2 months leading up. And unfortunately, our conference wasn't maybe as a whole wasn't in that same position. So navigating that next month was real challenging. We made a decision to start bringing our guys back, even with school being online at the beginning of September. But that was more in the minds that we were going to play spring, winter, something along those lines. And then all of a sudden, really last Tuesday, things started moving where we were maybe going to be more in line with the Big Ten's timeline. And lo and behold, that's where we're at. So we've had the last week and a half to kind of set our sights on, okay, if things go on October 24th, let's accelerate everything as much as we can. And that starts with a full-fledged practice tomorrow, and our guys are hungry, ready to go, and it'll be great for all of us to get back to some normalcy as far as just football on the field.
Well, for our purposes anyway, it's been a benefit that you have had some extra time to watch some film, because Josh Allen is off to, you can't even just call it a hot start. It is a historic start from NFL standpoint, and I broke down a lot of the numbers this week. It's not just from a start. Any 2 back-to-back games of regular season, whatever, or even carry over from a season finale into a season opener, any 2-game stretch, incredible rareness for what he's been able to accomplish. 729 passing yards, leads the NFL, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, very impressive. 70.4% completion percentage. And then you want to throw in that he's also rushed for 75 yards and a touchdown. Very few quarterbacks have done this in NFL history. It's only happened, this is the 19th time, and then there are some quarterbacks that did it multiple times, so very few have pulled this off. Brent, what have you seen from Josh Allen, and especially with the context that you have of his growth and having seen him come in from Reedley Community College? Well, maybe I'm loading up the question too much. Let's just enjoy these 2 weeks. What have you seen so far from Josh?
Well, what I see is Josh hasn't been satisfied with being a top 10 pick, with becoming a starter as a rookie. He's and it's no different than when he got here. He's had something to prove for a long, long time, going back to being an unrecruited kid out of Firebaugh, California. He chose to go to Reed. He chose the path with more resistance, to be quite honest. He believed in himself. And same thing when he came here. This, maybe wasn't the ideal choice when he set his sights on finding a Division I program, but it really aligned well. And I think the same thing ended up happening for him in Buffalo, and him kind of finding that common ground in the pre-draft process, and Buffalo moving up to take him. I think he found a place that really fit him. And, getting a chance to be in contact with him a little bit this summer, he got on a couple of Zooms with our quarterbacks and even our whole freshman class. You can just see a continuing maturity, a continual growth, a determination to fix the flaws, to keep getting better. And watching him these first couple of weeks, I think it's just maturity. It's knowing that he doesn't have to make every play while he still tries to at times, but just knowing when to check down, knowing when to slide, even though he hasn't slid every time. You can
once.
Yeah, it was. He needs to work on that, but it was a true slide.
It was.
Yeah. So I just think getting better, being there for his team, doing everything he can to give his team a chance to win is what he's about. And you got to keep growing to do that. And I think that's where he's, where his work is shining right now. And that determination is really showing through in these first couple games.
Brent, I think you know this as well as anybody, he's sort of a polarizing guy in terms of how people talk about him publicly. And certainly that lead up to the draft, he had a ton of eyes on him, and you guys had a ton of eyes on your games because of him. And there's criticism that comes with that. There's overanalyzing that comes with that. It followed him into the NFL, but he seems to compartmentalize and deal with it and find the right motivation from it, but not let it consume him. What do you notice about the way he's dealt with that aspect of being this polarizing guy, this guy that has to deal with criticism from all angles and seems to plow through it just fine?
Well, I know going back to his 2 seasons he played for us, 16 was this meteoric rise. We as a program and he as an individual in some ways came out of nowhere and had some real moments of success that Wyoming hadn't had in some time, beat a couple ranked teams and won our division and all that. It was in large part because of the way he played. And then all of a sudden the question about him entering that 17 draft posed itself, and he chose to come back for, I think, a lot of the right reasons. But then that 17 year, while all those eyes were on him, I think that year really, set him up for success dealing with criticism, if that's even a phrase you can use, because it didn't go as planned necessarily that year. There was some bumps in the road, and you kind of saw it happen there where he was, okay, I got all these eyes on me. It isn't just the local media scene. It's eyes from all over the country. And it happened the summer leading into that season, and ultimately as our games went on that year. And he came through that really well. And I think, he's at its core, he's got great character, comes from a great family, and believes in himself. And I think when you believe in yourself more than anything else, that outside noise is just that. You hear it. I'm certain he hears it, but he doesn't let it bring him down. He's going to go out there the next game and prove everybody wrong, just like he has tried to, I'm sure, going back to when he was in high school, even maybe before that. So he's not unique in that regard, but I think to be successful at the NFL level, at quarterback, you need to have thick skin. You need to have that belief in yourself, and I do think that's what he really possesses.
We're in conversation with Brent Vigen, the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and associate head coach at Wyoming. the alma mater of Josh Allen. And Brent, I went out to Firebaugh. I did a series of stories from Firebaugh with his family, the people close to the football program, who saw him from Pop Warner, his Pop Warner coaches, in fact. I interviewed them. And one of the themes that comes up is that he always dreamed of being an NFL quarterback. Well, la-di-da, so did I. Every kid at some point has dreams of being the staff ace of their favorite baseball team, or an NFL quarterback, or the starting goalie for the Montreal Canadiens. When he arrived at Wyoming from Reedley, it still, I think, mathematically was a long shot. Or if you took a look at the chances of this happening. I mean, how many NFL quarterbacks has Wyoming produced? I think none, maybe a couple. I know that there were some days during the WAC when there was prolific passing numbers, but that didn't necessarily translate to the NFL. So I guess, when, Brent, did you recognize in him that this guy's dream could be reality? And I guess maybe when did he think that too? Because I think he says that he always knew it, but that's also, he's still a teenager when he comes to you.
Right. He came to us in the spring semester, and he certainly flashed his ability to flash. You knew that talent-wise, he had been blessed, and that was starting to all take shape with his physical growth. But he had a long ways to go in so many different ways. And then he played, I think it was 13 plays, our second game of the 15 season, and broke his collarbone. But there was a flash there. I think that he said, okay, there's something here. And but that injury was a setback, but it also allowed him to take a step back and really say, okay, to be what I want to be. That's what he was thinking. I certainly was hoping he would just become a productive starter the next year. But for us, he had to go about his physical training in a different way. And he did that through that time. He soaked things up a little bit differently than he had. And then, where it started maybe to click for us as a coaching staff was that next season, and it wasn't immediately. He did some great things early, but you start putting this body of work together over maybe 7, 8, 9 games, and we were, I think, 7-2 after 9 games, and certainly he wasn't our only guy. We got a whole host of guys off that team that are playing across the NFL, but I think beyond his physical ability, what was apparent was that the competitive fire was there in a really hard to measure level, and he'd worked so hard, and I think he gained that respect of his teammates. He was elected a captain. So all those intangible things were coming to the front along with, his tangible qualities, his talents. So the whole going out early after his third year wasn't something that really occurred to me. And then we play our bowl game, and all of a sudden, I got a text from Carson Wentz that said, "Is your guy good enough to leave right now?" or something along those lines, because Carson's people wanted to get Josh in their fold. So it hit us, smack in the face right there in December of 16. And like I said before, ultimately he chose to come back. But that whole fall, it was an incredible rise for a guy in our league who was playing, playing a full season for the first time. This wasn't maybe even a Derek Carr that had played several years and, at Fresno, or, a lot of these guys at smaller schools. It takes a while, but he was 1 year into it, and he had done enough that fall for people to take notice. And, he's a unique, some of his qualities, while aren't specifically unique, I think the collection of his intangibles with his talent puts him on a pretty small scale.
And it should be mentioned, Brent Vigen coached Carson Wentz at North Dakota State, which is why that connection gets made. And let me ask you this. I know Matt's got more questions, but since you just mentioned Carson Wentz, that comparison gets made a lot. Josh Allen, Carson Wentz, and I think partially size. You look at the fact that you coached both of them. You get asked about these guys a lot. And I'm willing to sacrifice my own credentials here. Is that a lazy comparison just because you happen to coach them both? And you, as a polite representative of Wyoming, answer the questions nicely and will try to put something together for the journalist. Are they legitimate, or should they not be compared at all?
Well, I think the comparison in this day and age when quarterbacks come from nowhere, essentially, right? North Dakota State, Wyoming, I think they're immediately going to get dumped in the same bucket as opposed to guys that are coming from more acclaimed programs. So I think that's fair. I do think the physical characteristics are very similar. I know in knowing both of them, they're different. They process things different, but they're both, incredibly competitive. They're not going to let anybody tell them they can't do something, and I think their intangibles from a competitiveness, from their foundation, character, and all those things are very similar, but they process things different. And, I think they were both fortunate to land in situations where early on they handed the keys and be given support in a pretty quick fashion, and obviously things are a little bumpy for Carson right now, but I trust that he'll come out of it. It's his way, I guess. So yeah, maybe a little bit lazy, I suppose, but there's definitely similarities beyond just the fact that, Coach Bowl and I are associated with him.
When you think about these first two games, like you said, kind of a unique chance to watch your guys in the league. Usually you're busy game planning or breaking down tape from your game the day before and don't get to sink your teeth into NFL tape. What have you seen? I mean, like Tim mentioned, this is an unusual 2-game run from Josh in terms of jumps from when you had him, or maybe even jumps from, clips of his rookie season and second year that you've seen. Mechanically, how he's commanding the offense. What type of things have you seen from him that way where he's made improvements, maybe the biggest areas of improvement for him?
Well, the 70% plus completion, I think, is reflective of making all those check down throws that he should. He hasn't, I don't think he's missed many of those, if any. I think he's missed some hard throws, in particular, maybe going to his left. But he hasn't missed the ones. I know in college, you go through a course of the season, both those years, and there was a handful of, that thing, maybe that's 2-3% from a completion percentage that you just miss a throw. And I think what I see mechanically, there's just a real calmness to him, and that's a lot of things. That's I'm certain he feels comfortable with what he's seeing and processing all of that. That's such in a different place than it's been his first 2 years. So he's surveying the field differently. He's not escaping the pocket maybe as radically as he maybe would have as a younger quarterback. There's been several times in these first 2 games where it seems like he's had all day back there, and that's a credit to, certainly him trusting his O-line, but his O-line, blocking their tails off, I guess. And he still made some really spectacular plays where you say, like, maybe it's the addition of a few receivers last year, certainly the addition of Diggs this year, where he's trusting his guys too, and they're making some plays. That's all part of success in the passing game. It's having guys on the other end that can make plays, and it seems like they've done a good job in Buffalo of really growing that receiving core over the last couple of years. And as a passing unit, I guess they look much more complete certainly than they did when he was out there as a rookie.
We're in conversation with Brent Vigen. He's the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and associate head coach at Wyoming. Brent, I'm not really sure how to phrase this question. So if you can maybe meander with me as I try to pull it out here. But, from a philosophical standpoint, uh, how do you, especially as somebody who knows Josh Allen and his fieriness, his propensity for hero ball, because at some point in his life he's made that play and he thinks he can do it again, and maybe he can, but sometimes he gets reminded and smacked back down to reality. We haven't really seen too much of that through these first two games, and yet you have a quarterback who's on a nice run and he's feeling it. What is that sweet spot between letting, maybe not just a quarterback, as an offensive coordinator, a guy who played tight end himself, any athlete, what's that sweet spot of go do it? You know, you're feeling this, you're on this run, versus keep your cleats on the ground here and don't do anything stupid. You know, let's play within yourself. But yet sometimes these guys just get into this otherworldly place and you want to experience it, whether you're a fan and probably even if you're a coach.
Yeah, that's a real difficult question to have this simple answer. I think you want your athletes to push those limits the best they can, understand where that line is. And I think, in Josh's 2 years with us, I mean, there was a lot of breaking down his first year so that his second year, some of those mistakes didn't occur. Understanding when that scoreboard, you might be down 21, there's not a 21-point play out there. You know, taking what the defense gives you. I mean, you could go on and on with the cliches. I did hear Josh say, relative to that 1 3rd and 8 run where he jumped over the guy, ran over the guy, he understands he can't do that all the time. So that in itself is something for him to say that. He was trying to get a first down there, and in those picking and choosing your battles is maybe what I think he's learning. I think his 2 carries in that game were that run where he jumped over a guy, ran over a guy. Ultimately, the ball didn't, whatever happened. And then he had the one long run where he slid. I mean, and so, I think he's learning, and that's that continued maturity that you see is he's one of 11 now. You certainly can say he's the most important of one of the 11, but he's got guys that he can lean on that offensive unit, and that's something that when you're referring to an individual pushing those limits, I think that's what you got to understand is you still need to rely on the rest of the guys out here. You can't be the guy trying to make every play. And that's development of a roster. That's development of him just individually, I think, understanding. He talked a lot to our quarterbacks this summer about down and distance and understanding that principle, understanding field position, when and where to take your chances. So he went through this whole thing with our quarterbacks, and you could tell he's just processing everything differently, way more ahead of his thoughts than he would. I'm sure he looks over and sees that down and distance, and he's calculating his risks a little bit differently than he would have maybe just going out and they're playing as a rookie. So I don't know if that answers your question necessarily. It's complicated, but I think it's a limit I'm sure they want him to push, but know where those boundaries are. And I think he understands those boundaries much more now than he maybe did a couple years ago.
What have you noticed about, and maybe it hasn't changed or maybe it has, but you were at North Dakota State for a long time, and you see in the last few years, there's Carson Wentz, there's Josh Allen, now there's Trey Lance. These guys from smaller programs that seem to be on the radar sooner and in the spotlight sooner. Obviously, it's always been a case of you find football players where you find football players. But what do you think Carson Wentz and Josh Allen have done to maybe change the minds of the athlete when they're picking a school and saying, hey, I can go to Wyoming and get the same coaching Josh Allen and Carson Wentz got, or I can go to North Dakota State, and if I'm good enough, they'll find me. Do you think there's been a shift at all in how maybe the recruits are thinking about their futures and where they choose to go to school?
Well, I wouldn't maybe say collectively, but I do think kids, if they really, as quarterbacks, if they really truly want to make their way, it's finding a place where they can thrive. And I do think maybe that pool is becoming a little bit greater. You still see tons of kids, quarterbacks transfer because they probably pick their place based on where everybody thinks they should go as opposed to what fits them best. And that's something when we recruit our guys that we're really trying to instill in them is, hey, we think you can become your best here because you really fit what we're looking for. And if more kids thought that way and didn't think simply, I want to go to the best place or the best perceived place. But I do think more kids are understanding that they can thrive in all kinds of places. And if they thrive, ultimately the NFL is going to find them. I think it has spiked where more kids are coming out of obscure, places than ever before. And I think these two guys, Carson and Josh, certainly helped lay that groundwork a little bit.
I'm looking it up here, and you ended your thought just about 10 seconds too quickly. I also wanted to mention that Brent Vigen recruited Easton Stick to North Dakota State. So let's just take a quick look at – I'm trying to look at some histories here. Carson Wentz, the first quarterback drafted out of North Dakota State, and Josh Allen Easton Stick, right? I mean, why isn't he on
drafted?
this?
Yeah, Easton
He was drafted in the 5th round in 2019, so he should be on this list too. Josh Allen, the first quarterback out of Wyoming to be drafted. I'm looking to see if anybody's how many have even made it to the NFL. Okay, so the only other Wyoming player to throw a pass in the NFL was Jim Kick, and for a younger generation here watching, as you can see, I have a little Gale Sayers paying a little tribute. I'm going to start, alternating some things back there, but so I remember Jim Kick. Jim Kick was a running back who, he was back on those Dolphins teams with Larry Zonka and Mercury Morris. So he's the only guy to have thrown a pass in the NFL out of Wyoming prior to Josh Allen. So Brent, just to Matt's question, you're recruiting guys. You've recruited 3 NFL quarterbacks at North Dakota State, at Wyoming. I guess this is a chance for you to tout yourself here, but I guess when you go into a recruit's living room, you have a very unusual resume that you can show them to say, hey, come on with me. I've at least gone down this path a few times.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that play in it. I think in recruiting, we kind of have a pretty good idea what we're looking for. The type of kid that can essentially come out of nowhere, so to speak, and climb to those heights. Now, we haven't been perfect by any means, but to do that, you got to find a kid that's probably far from a finished product coming out of high school, but certainly coming out of his junior year of high school. So you're probably looking for something that's missing. And sometimes what's missing is, the kid played 3 sports. He just hasn't been this year-round quarterback. And that would be the case in both Josh and Carson's story. They were 3-sport kids. They weren't quarterback circuit kids. And I think we have a system, both what we ask the guys to do physically and then how they learn a system and apply principles in the protection game and the run game that not everybody might get. Certainly the concepts we throw in, all that's, relatable to NFL, but it's more how they learn the position and what they're asked to do is along the lines of what NFL quarterbacks asked to do. So I think there's things along the way that they learn and pick up that prepare them. But I know this, that resume or whatever is only as good as the next guy's coming through. So, we have a couple of good young kids right now, and I hope that we can add their names to that, or one of their names to that story, whatever. But no, it's been fun, and to see those guys get to that next level is something else. That's for sure.
And to round out, I didn't want to leave North Dakota State. The only other player to throw an NFL pass from North Dakota State prior to Carson Wentz was defensive back Ernie Wheeler in the 1930s. So a little bit of a break in between North Dakota State NFL passers. All right, I got to ask you one more, and we'll let you go. And I apologize for keeping you long here. You got a season to play all of a sudden. What's with the fumbles between your two NFL quarterbacks? What happened with this instruction at North Dakota State with Carson Wentz and Josh Allen at Wyoming? Why did you never practice with a wet ball? What happened there?
I can't take credit or blame for that. I don't think. I don't know. You know what? I think in Josh's case, in Carson's probably what I've seen. It's probably just trying to hang on to plays too long more than it is their grasp of the football. Maybe, I don't know. Josh's 2 fumbles in that first game. He probably got a little loose with. They're both on runs, obviously, as opposed to getting hit from a passing perspective. We work ball security like a running back would, so I don't. Maybe they're not doing that still. I don't know, but no, that's something they both would need to correct. That's a turnover is a turnover. The way
are you blaming sloppy NFL fundamentals?
I'm not saying anything. No, I don't know. It's something they both need to fix. So I know that much.
Hey, Brent, thanks for joining us. Have a great season in Laramie, one of my all-time favorite cities. I used to cover the WAC, the old WAC, when I was based in Vegas. I covered UNLV football. I had an occasion to go up to Laramie a handful of times, and what a great town. And I know it can't be easy to recruit there, but when you have a Josh Allen that has gone from Laramie to the NFL, I'm sure it makes it a little bit easier. And it was nice of you to join us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. And I know there's a lot of people that follow the Bills out here in Wyoming. I think they've maybe supplanted the Broncos as the top team. So we're watching closely, and let's hope Josh keeps this run going.
All right, thanks so much for joining us, Brent.
Thank you.